The square. The square is everybody's favorite. Well, at least it's my favorite. We're going to go through these. We're going to mark them. So hopefully you've already looked at them. Opposite sides are congruent. That means the right equals the left and the top equals the bottom. Opposite sides are parallel. So we mark congruent with tick marks and we mark parallel with arrows. Opposite angles are congruent. Well, that's true because they're all right angles. Consecutive angles are supplementary. So that means neighbors. Neighboring angles. So those two add up to 180. And those two add up to 180. And these two add up to 180. And I would so encourage you to write these down on a piece of paper. The neighboring angles add up to 180. Diagonals bisect each other. That's what these tick marks mean. So those diagonals have been cut in half. If this is 2, then this is 2, and this is 2, and this is 2. There are 4 right angles. We've kind of already said that with opposite angles are congruent. So opposite angles are congruent and right. Diagonals are congruent. So if diagonals have been bisected and they're all equal, then they're also going to be congruent. This doesn't happen in every shape. This is kind of special to the square. We also have 4 congruent sides. That kind of goes back to 4 congruent sides, back to this one, opposite sides are congruent. So the diagonals are congruent. That's special to a square. Well, special to things with right angles anyway. 4 congruent sides is definitely special to a square and a rhombus. And then diagonals are perpendicular. These diagonals right here in both a rhombus and a square are perpendicular. Diagonals form right angles. They're called perpendicular. And then diagonals bisect. That means if this is a right angle, it cuts it in half. So that's 45 degrees and 45 degrees and 45 degrees and 45 degrees. Oh my gosh, that is so many things on that square. That is a rainbow mess, right? So now that we've talked about the square and we've talked about a rhombus, let's go to this slide and see if we can, gotta get my eraser, see if we can compare them. So what's similar between a square and a rhombus? Well, let's type it out. Sides are congruent. All 4 sides of a square are congruent. All 4 sides of a rhombus are congruent. Opposite, sides are congruent and parallel, right? And parallel. Angles are bisected. Angles are bisected. So one thing that's special about a square and a rhombus is those diagonals or those angles are bisected. And the diagonals are perpendicular. Diagonals are perpendicular. Look at those pictures and see if you can come up with anything else that's similar about them. We've got this square, we've got this rhombus. What's different? So some of the things that are different that I see are the lines of symmetry. Square has 4 lines of symmetry. And the rhombus has 2. The square has 4 lines of symmetry. Those are the ways you can fold it in half. And the rhombus only has 2. In the square, the diagonals are congruent. And in the rhombus, there are 1 short and 1 long. So when the square gets run over by a truck, the diagonals change, right? Still 4 congruent sides, still opposite angles that are congruent, but they're no longer right. So opposite angles are congruent, but no longer right. in a rhombus. Okay. Again, lots of different things you could put there. Those are just the things that I saw. Take a second and really look at what's different between a square and a rhombus. You can even go to the little hourglass up here and zoom in so you can see these pretty drawings. The angles have been bisected for sure. The opposite angles are congruent, but they're no longer right. The diagonals are congruent here. 2.12, 2.12, 2.12, 2.12. They're congruent and have been bisected. Here they've been bisected, but they're no longer congruent. I got one long diagonal and one short diagonal. All right, guys, that's enough of this. We're going to do trapezoids and then off to your mastery check.